Guys, this is GamerCard. Welcome to another Pokemon Trading Card Game History video. Strap yourselves in for a bit of a long one here because it's rotation time, and the 2015 rotation is a larger one than normal, so we have even more cards to talk about here. We are rotating from Boundaries Crossed On to X and Y On, so we're getting rid of every trace of Generation 5 within 2 rotations actually. It's kind of, this is the 3rd rotation for it. So, kind of fun how that's worked out. But, yeah, we have like 6 sets to go over here. We've got Boundaries Crossed, the set that introduced the Blastoise Keldeo stuff, and A-Specs as a whole. So, like, all of those are going. We have Plasma Storm, which introduced our Plasma stuff. A little bit of a weird set, but there's some very impactful things in here which are going as well. We have Plasma Freeze, which had the entire Plasma archetype, basically. A very good deck that we just didn't play too often late in. Like, we played it with, I think the last one it was played with was the Fairy Box stuff from Pepper, which was cool, but difficult to play, so yeah. Then we have Plasma Blast, which is where Virizion Genesect came in. Fantastic deck for pretty much all of its lifespan. It didn't see any real showing at Worlds 2015 or like any top 32 placements, but that was like the one time basically, and that's mostly because of Shaman existing at that point. The deck just became too slow, but it was ridiculous for so long. And then Legendary Treasures goes as well, so all of our reprint Pokemon basically from all of Gen 5's like history stuff go as well. We finally get rid of a couple of very notable Pokemon as a result. We do have some promos going as well, but these are largely reprint stuff with 1 or 2 notable exceptions. That's what promos are usually best for, is if they are reprints of cards like tin promos and stuff like that, because if a promo card is actually like super playable, it often becomes a problem of accessibility, so it's better that they are in the core sets, like the good cards, for the most part. But there's some pretty quality promo prints in here that we'll talk about as well. So, yeah, this is an awful lot to go through, and I do have my usual sort of breakdown here, but as you can see, there are a very large number of Pokemon and trainer cards here as well to go over, so as I say, strap yourselves in. We do have some stuff that isn't rotating permanently, however. The next rotation is also pretty large in terms of like next year, 2015 to 2016, is a really big one for how many sets are released. There's about 6 in rotation, so we've got a lot to cover in the next one. And so not every trainer is going to go away here, so let's go over what we have. Juniper is getting an honorable mention here because yes, Juniper is going away, but Sycamore is the same card, so yeah, we just have to switch to playing Sycamore now. I've stuck with playing Juniper the whole time just because I personally like this artwork a little bit more, but the Sycamore one is pretty great, so we'll go into that. We don't get any reprints in Ancient Origins, our very next set, but the set afterwards. Breakthrough gives us back Floatstone, it gives us back Skylar, with artwork, let's just put it that way, and we get Town Map back as well. So Night March is maybe a little bit weaker without this for like one set, but even then, not every Night March deck even played Town Map, so there you go. In the set after that, Breakpoints, we get Max Potion back, and this would be where Garbodor is like rotated, but this Garbodor actually comes in instead. It is technically a different card, but it's got the same ability, same retreat cost, same HP and everything. It's just the attack is different, and debatably worse, debatably better, depends what your situation is, I guess. Might be easier to use, if nothing else. But, yeah, Garbodor is leaving us for a couple of sets, and then it comes back, and that's kind of annoying, but it is what it is. And then finally, in Fates Collide, which is a couple of sets after this one, we get N as a reprint, which I remember really disliking back in the day. I was just, especially because Judge comes out during this bit as well, I was just hoping this card would stay gone because it was just frustrating to deal with, but I could see why people really like it, so sure. And then we get Random Receiver back as well. This was the artwork I was actually using all through Gen 5 because I just preferred it. But yeah, Random Receiver comes in as well, just in case you need to like tutor supporters even more, I suppose. So with that all said, let's just dive in. It's all in numerical order, like Pokedex order as they always are. Let's just dive in and go through all of the stuff that we're losing. Not all of this is competitively relevant right now, but we'll go over that sort of thing as we do. Blastoise, of course, is competitively relevant. It's been relevant almost since it came out. It did lose a lot when Tropical Beach rotated, especially, but it made a came back with a vengeance with Archie's Ace in the Hole, and if it was still in format, it would absolutely 100% see play, because, I mean, the deck won Worlds in this year, so absolutely this thing would still see play. Fantastic card. Unfortunate that we lose it, I suppose, but whatever. Ninetales never really had its time to shine because it was in the format with Pokemon Catcher, so even though it was even more searchable than Luxray was, it just never got to the same heights as that. But the Ninetales Amoonguss deck was incredibly fun to play. It worked well with Hypnotoxic Laser as well, so you could definitely make this happen. And I love it, personally. I feel like this card could have definitely seen more play, but, you know, it's hard when Level Ball rotates to keep this going, so yeah. Magnezone is more here because I think the effect is cool, and we do have a lot more utility supporters now than what we did during Gen 5. So, yeah, definite scope for this to have seen play. There's a Magnezone coming out in a couple of sets, which is, Blastoise, but for Lightning. Absolutely could have seen play in the same deck as this. Playing two supporters in a turn is ridiculous. Being able to do Disruption and draw in the same thing is great. We played it in the Delphox deck, which was pretty funny. Just being able to get more supporters set up was cool, so yeah. Execute is another big loss for the Archie deck, but honestly, that deck is losing way too much anyway, so we'll see if it even survives, to be honest. But Propagation is very cool in a format where you've got like Ultra Balls, Superior Energy Retrieval, Computer Search, stuff like that, a lot of discard 2 potential, and Battle Compressor exists to just get it into the discard immediately. It's a very, very great card to include, so long as you don't start it, obviously. The fact of it is not technically a once per turn, it's a once per turn per discard is ridiculous. I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but whatever. Kingdra, most notably, was in that Greninja deck that Sai played, but it's actually really, really cool in that deck. Being able to spread damage alongside the Greninja and then have a big finishing turn with Dragon Vortex is very, very good. So, yeah, it was a fun card. It took a while before it was any sort of relevant, if you could call it that, but the deck actually did do pretty well in state championships and stuff around the time, so it was viable, and that's really cool. Maybe the last time we get to say that about a Kingdra card, actually, unfortunately, but oh well. Mr. Mime is going, although I should caveat this one, because this technically gets a side grade print in Generations, so I probably should have had it up here, to be honest. But Bench Barrier going for a little bit. There's a Fairy type one that comes out later on, which will be useful for the same reasons. Bench Barrier in this instance is fantastic because it also prevents your own bench damage, so like Grenade Hammer from Seismitoad doesn't hit yourself, so yeah, really, really good card. Ditto never quite saw its time, but it's a very, very interesting card nonetheless, and yeah, I probably would have considered it in more decks going forward. I played this in the Latios thing as much as you didn't get to see it in the first Roaring Skies battle thing, and it was mostly so that I didn't have as many Shaman starts. You know, having 6 out of your 9 basics being Shaman proof, basically, was really good. And yeah, it's a cool card, and if you're relying solely on one Pokemon to do the thing, then this gives you extra copies to start with, so it's great. This Eevee is somewhat noteworthy because we do have the X Effect evolutions coming out, the Jolteon, Vaporeon, Flareon in Ancient Origins. They add a typing to your Stage 1 Pokemon, and being able to search those out would be kind of cool. But we do lose like all of the Plasma EVs as well, so the Flareon with its Vengeance stuff. Don't worry for the fans of Flareon Night March, Vespiquen comes out in the next set and that replaces this anyway, but still really cool to have the alternate type coverage. Umbreon giving the Plasma Pokemon extra HP actually did make some interesting deck stuff in the Plasma archetype. The Leafeon was really good at dealing with Seismitoad. I think we lose our best answer to that now, because alongside Gen 5 rotating, water resistance as a whole rotates, which is really annoying actually. So yeah, Seismitoad just gets that little bit stronger when you don't get to resist it all the time. Leafeon was the perfect out to that, especially with Energy Evolution on the Flash Fire Eevee. So yeah. Glaceon, giving Plasma Pokemon less retreat, didn't normally see a ton of play, but it could if you were playing the other EVs anyway. Signs of Evolution to get this out wasn't too bad. And yeah, that's the relevant EVs anyway. There's a couple of others, but they're very much like not relevant in a format where Megas are really good, so yeah. Snorlax is going. This could be turned off by Silent Lab, but Block is a ridiculously dumb ability to have, where just stopping the opponent from retreating is a thing. We did see the Quad Snorlax deck go in after all, so yeah, very dumb deck to deal with, to be honest. And honestly, Team Pact did come up sometimes. It wasn't common, but you could do stuff with that. So yeah, just irritating as a card, to be honest. Articuno is more here for the quirk relevance, I suppose, also because the artwork is beautiful and I want to show it again. Frost Prison being able to auto-paralyze is fantastic. It's just difficult to use because it's on 4 energy, one of which has to be Plasma, but auto-paralysis is busted as hell, so yeah, very cool card if nothing else. There's a couple of Dragonites in Roaring Skies, and Deafen being here. I guess I think this was like, who was it that played this? One of the Sable House brothers, I think, played this, and according to PTCGL, and it actually did do some success. Stuff like this, Victini and Garbodor, I think, was the deck that they used for stuff that way. Just item lock with before Seismitoad came in. Obviously nowadays horribly outclassed, but we're looking at all the cards that were relevant in some form or another. And Mewtwo EX, of course, is the poster child for that. Yeah, we finally get rid of this dingus after having it since 2012. Good lord. It's a long time this was legal. X-Ball is a very repeated attack during the history of the game from here on out. It's not this wasn't the original version of this. I want to say, I don't think it was even Gardevoir from Ruby Sapphire that had a version of this. Maybe that was the main one. There's always been like Psywave and Psychic style attacks, right? Where the opponent's energy matters, not as many where your energy matters as well. But it is a mainstay from here on out. Even in the very next set, there's a copy of this attack in Lugia. So yeah, don't expect the attack to go away, but this one absolutely did. So yay, I suppose. Mew EX takes a format out. Despite getting like 6 sets printed within the next bit, Mew EX's XY promo print did not come out until after Steam Siege. So yeah, I don't know why, because that's like right at the end of X and Y, but whatever. Yeah, Versatile is leaving us for a fair bit, and we probably won't see it again afterwards. I don't remember if it was any good in like 2017, but yeah, this thing is disappearing, I suppose. Weavile was a really cool deck, and I did love this with the Execute. You could technically play it at the moment too, but I think it's a bit too awkward without Dart Patch, so that's why I haven't really bothered. But, I mean, I guess Yveltal could accelerate to it, so that's kind of neat. And Vilify could just, like, stack to however high you need it to go, you know? It's more difficult now, because hitting 220, 240 is, like, really tough to do. But you could, and you could battle compressor the executes and stuff away, so that could still be something. It would have been better with Level Ball coming out, so yeah, a bit of a miss, I guess. Donphan is something we saw quite a bit of play in the end. It took a long time to get going, but once Furious Fist came out, this card was a menace, being able to use all of the fighting type stuff and doing hit and run tactics. You could easily get to like 100 damage with this thing against EXs and keep it safe on the bench. And it got better, like Trevenant was the thing obviously for it, and then Robo-Sub came out, and that's another thing you can use. Wobbuffet stops abilities and all that fun stuff. There's tons of things you could switch into to really make the opponent miserable with this card. So yeah, very, very good one. We do lose both Safeguarders in this thing, this rotation. Suicune and later on Sigilyph will be shown, so it's a bit of a shame. Suicune was generally the better one in the long run, but it did have a higher retreat cost. Maybe with Level Ball coming back, Sigilyph would have made more of a comeback, but yeah, Safeguard is just a fantastic ability. But Silent Lab does turn it off, so maybe not as incredible now, we'd have to see. Lugia EX was its own sort of deck in Plasma, but it's one of many variants that you could play, and Overflow is just a busted text on a card, right? KO an opponent by damage from this Pokemon, take an extra prize card. You can never ask for more than that. Absolutely ridiculous, you know? So, yeah, very, very strong card. Got kind of outclassed by the end of everything, but still incredibly good. Celebi, this one is replaced by... oh, that's Masquerain now. Celebi was replaced by Shrine of Memories as a stadium card, so we really don't need this effect here, and it was always a dangerous liability, but it's the kind of effect that is really cool to see in the format. Not always necessary and not always the most healthy, but being able to use your pre-evolution attacks, if they actually bother to print good ones, is very fun. And this card is good. There's not much else to say with it. It was, like, that effect is really cool. And if your deck has a good Prevo attack, you'll want to use it. Masquerain, I think in the very end of the next rotation, there's a Weavile that replaces this effect, but being able to strip the tools off you, honestly, if it was a little bit easier to get this thing out and like keep it in play, we probably could have used this as anti-headringer technology, because that would have just discarded the headringers off of your stuff, and that's pretty cool, but ultimately finding the space for it usually wasn't like great, and it is an 80 HP Pokemon, so I don't know. Flygon, a bit of a storied history on this one. It was mostly Tropical Beach is what made this decent, but like Excelgor Flygon was a thing. Flygon with the Dusknoir, we'll be talking about in a little bit, was really strong. So long as you could keep this active, so you could like Donphan to this as well, which if you wanted to. So long as you could keep it active, you get extra damage counters on the opponent's Pokemon in between turns, and that damage racked up very quickly. Problem is, its attack was useless, so it kind of just didn't do anything by itself, so it was a very hard deck to build and pilot, but yeah, very strong nonetheless. Lunatone did see some play here and there, not very much, but it was noteworthy because just being able to look at the top two cards of the deck was respectable, and there are a couple of times that's like synergistic. There's Ether that you could use for it. Nowadays, coming up fairly soon, Max Elixir would be a good one for it. And I suppose you could Acrobike after you know what the two cards are. You know, you could judge whether or not you want to Acro. So, yeah, I think it's alright. Dusknoir was insane, probably one of the strongest abilities we have seen in quite a while that doesn't just read stop the opponent playing the game. Sinister Hand, being able to manipulate the opponent's damage is unbelievably powerful, and yeah, it's not much else to say with it. It's just a crazy strong effect that any spread deck would love to have around. We do get this returning in the form of attacks, like we have had this as an attack before, but specifically I'm thinking Tapu Lele in Generation 7, like the non-EX one, or non-GX, sorry, has got it, so we do get this kind of thing back, but never as an ability, because it's just too strong when you can do that, like, without attacking. Such a good card. Absol I always loved here as well, because Mind Jack is pretty powerful. We are going to get Mind Jack back in Zoroark in a couple of sets time, so that effect is not going anywhere, but unfortunately this Absol is. It was a really nice addition to the Plasma decks. It could attack for less energy than everything else could. That was good, right? You know, the Kyurem really wanted free energy, and most of the EX stuff wasn't really attacking for as much damage as this could do, so, or, you know, as efficiently. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. Latias is immune to anything that has an ability, so that's pretty cool. You could Silent Labbit. I was gonna say System Down. It is not even mechanical whatsoever. Yeah, it's possible to turn this ability off at this point without even having to use Gardevoir. No, Garbodor. Good lord, talking is difficult. But yeah, it's cool enough, but there were enough things in the format at basically all times that did not have abilities that it made it kind of very situational, but as part of a wall-like structure, you could absolutely play this sort of thing. Latios didn't really see any play, but Lusterpurge was like really close. If we didn't have Black Curon that we'll talk about later on, I think this would have been the Blastoise choice, like as far as deck stuff goes, but obviously that doesn't matter when we do have that thing. Having to discard all your energy at all times is exceptionally irritating though. But Mark Flight is a pretty good ability, just not, not even ability, it's an attack, but like, not being able to retreat is really great to inflict on the opponent if they don't have Keldeo, but you know. Rayquaza was historical, mostly. This was obviously part of the Raybor deck, which we will talk about Emboar in a little bit as well, but yeah, just being able to do quick pressure and having Shred as an attack as well. It was a non-EX that you could hit within the Rayquaza deck, and that's powerful enough in its own right. It used to be able to two-shot everything, and then Megas happened. Jirachi does not technically come back until Tapu Lele GX, so yeah, Stellar Guidance, and it technically never even comes back when that's a thing, because this is 90 HP, so it is Level Ball searchable. This gets rotated right before Level Ball comes back, so rip Jirachi I guess. We'll just have to play our Shaymins and draw 24 cards instead, boo-hoo, right? Yeah, no, being able to search any supporter out of your deck is a very, very strong effect, and it has been life-saving in a lot of situations, so probably for the best that we don't keep it, because Wally is really stupid, but, you know, still a bit of a shame. Deoxys is part of the Plasma deck, giving them extra firepower, and it even became a staple in Virizion Gen set decks by the end of their lifespan, because it let you hit Mega Pokemon with G-Booster for one-shots, so it saw a lot of play even after the Plasma deck stopped seeing play, so strong card all around. Empoleon is pretty good. It was pretty strong on release, and it only really stayed where it was for the most part. It was always an interesting deck to play with. Being able to do damage based on every Pokemon in play was great. It would probably be, if not super playable, it'd be a very interesting Archie deck with Skyfield. So that could have been cool to experiment with, but ultimately, yeah, we don't have the time for that, to be honest. And it's just tough at this point, but it's got a really strong ability. We've seen this come up even right now with Curliers, so we know this ability is super strong, and the attack is efficient and strong enough to see relevance as well. Drifblim, we didn't play this very much, at all. I think it's mostly because it was a tech attacker, and oftentimes we're taking lists from, a lot of the time we are taking and just modifying lists from the website stuff, because they're historically accurate for tournament play, and if you're playing it at a tournament, then there's at least a good reason for this stuff, right? This didn't come up very often, and most of the builds that you see will not play this, but Shadow Steel is a crazy strong attack. 50 damage for every special energy in the opponent's discard pile for a single energy. Good god, that is strong. So, yeah, against the right sort of deck, this is just going to absolutely slay. And it did see play, just not a ton of, I guess, high-level success in the reported tournaments? It's kind of hard to say. Not really sure on this one. Drifblim the second was an anti-Plasma tech, and if you were really bad into Plasma as a deck, then you would play this, because it costs less to attack for every Plasma Pokemon the opponent had in play, and it did 70 and discard a special energy, which synergizes with the other one. So there was definitely a Drifblim deck that you could play. I think the reason we didn't play it in the end is because we couldn't guarantee that we were going to go against Plasma. And so, yeah, as good as these cards were, with such a micro format here, it didn't really make a ton of sense for us to spec that hard, I guess. But, you know, it is what it is. If we played with like 20 people or something in like a little local style thing, we could have easily seen this be played. Spiritomb was a card I just didn't like in basically any of the lists it was in. There were a few decks that it was teched into, and I took it out like every single time. Being able to block A-Spec cards from being played is solid against exactly Virizion Genesect, and basically no other matchup. There are very, very few other decks that you will actually be able to recycle an A-Spec. So once, you know, the Sableye rotated at the very least. So yeah, I never played it because I never really figured we were ever going to play that much Virizion Genesect, but if your meta was flooded with it, then this is a good card to include because it stops them from reusing the tool. So yeah. Garchomp was good historically, or I should say at the very least it was like tier 2, tier 3 when it came out. I think it was tier 2 when it came out. It would be pretty reasonable for it. It did win some local events and stuff with Dragons Exalted. Just a very quick and efficient attacker. The Altaria rotates as well, and I actually didn't include that in here, but the Altaria was a key part of the deck too, where it does 20 extra damage for the, you know, your dragon Pokemon. So that ended up turning this into a do 80, do 100, do maybe 120 with Mark Cut. You then add the damage boost that we got later on in the formats with Simple Bangle and Muscle Band, and it starts getting to be really scary. Blend Energy actually helped a ton with this as well when it was still legal to get to Dragon Blade as well. So very, very good. Just it fell off, obviously. It's a stage 2, of course it's going to. Abomasnow I'm putting in here because when Flashfire came out, this was, I wouldn't say a mandatory include, but it was a very recommended include in Virizion Genesect, so you could counter Pyroar, because otherwise the deck absolutely smoked you. But it also ended up being pretty solid against Reshiram, which is also something that deck tends to have a lot of trouble with. So yeah, this ended up getting outclassed by Beartic the following set with Furious Fists, because that also beat Pyroar and generally did better into other things. But yeah, I mean, it's a grass attacking water type. That's cool in its own right, you know? Palkia is mostly here because Pepper was messing around with it. I hate this card because it's just terrible, but it is a basic that can do hit and run stuff. And we did just see that Gengar ended up being pretty solid from Sai with the Gengar and Trevenant deck on Roaring Skies Part 1. So yeah, hit and run stuff is fine enough, and it is all colorless, but it's only 50 damage, and 3 colorless is a lot to pay. I guess you could Plasma like Chorus Machine to it, but really, I don't know. I never liked this card. I didn't think it did enough. Darkrai is going, and probably couldn't come early enough for a lot of people, because man, Darkrai has been like everywhere. It's just so good at everything, right? Night Spear is no longer the dominant attack that it used to be, but Dark Cloak is incredibly powerful. 180 HP was still really good. Even now it's good for non-megas. And yeah, it just like does everything, you know. It does a little bit of snipe damage. It would be pretty okay at trading into Night March if it didn't like give up Dark Patch, I suppose. But like when it came out, it was just unbelievably powerful, and it was dominant for so long. I'm pretty sure this was also in like 2016 Worlds somehow. I'd have to check, but I'm pretty sure that was won by Darkrai too. So maybe I'm wrong on this one, but I know this one rotates, so I'll have to have a look. I don't remember what the Worlds format was for that clearly. But yeah, I remember it seeing a lot of play. Maybe it was expanded tournaments and stuff. I remember it seeing a lot of play later too. Oh well. Shaman is noteworthy because it did actually see tech play in quite a few decks, especially in like Darkrai Hydreigon when the Blend Energy was available and Prism Energy and stuff like that. So Revenge Blast was just good to finish off games, right? 180 damage if the opponent's down to 1 prize, end them to 1, Revenge Blast them, they might not be able to kill you, so yeah. Victini gets rotated. I'm pretty sure it's Gen 7 before this comes back. Victory Star, we do have Trick Coin, that will do the same thing as a tool card right now, but that does take up the tool slot, so yeah. Being able to reflip certain attacks is very annoying for the opponent, but very fun for you if it's like, you know, say Mega Aggron or Malamar or something like that, where like getting a bunch of heads actually does a good result for you, so yeah. Speaking on Victini, the Victini EX also gets sprinted here as well, like this gets rotated. Turbo Energize was really solid at the time, like it's a fantastic setup card, mostly because of Victory Piece, to be honest, and Intensifying Burn was excellent against Frisian Genesect, so yeah, Victory Piece making it attack for 0 was really what made this card great, so yeah, bit of a shame we're losing it, I suppose. Emboar, just like Blastoise, goes away, so right now we don't have any Energy Flood in the format as far as Deluge style things or Rain Dance effects go, but again, we will get that in a couple of sets with Magnezones, there is that. We've got other energy accelerants at the very least, but it's a shame because this is like the only time Emboar is any good, so yeah. Stoutland's a stupid control card that I don't care for too much, but it was used in some of the hit and run things because preventing the opponent playing a supporter card is irritating, so yeah, especially when Gusting went to supporters as well, like not being able to Lysander that out the active, you could do some stupid stuff with that. Munna is another weird card to put on here, but Long Distance Hypnosis did see a decent bit of play, so we'll note it anyway. If you could mitigate the fact of you might put yourself to sleep, like say with Virizion, to prevent that from even being a thing in the first place, it's pretty solid. Let's get ourselves a drink out here because we've still got a lot of stuff to talk about, so let's keep ourselves refreshed here. As they used to do bots in the channels and stuff, stay hydrated, etc. Let's move on to Audino. Yeah, this card wasn't played too often, even with Hypnotoxic Laser being a thing, but it was really good for the Flareon decks, and it would still be good for the Vespiquen decks, I reckon. Being able to heal 10. I think you have to be able to do at least one of these though, so maybe it wouldn't be quite so good with Hypnotoxic Laser rotating, but being able to use a Pokemon in hand, get extra damage with your Revenge attack or Vengeance style thing, and healing status conditions off of yourself was a really powerful effect. So yeah, it could have been played more often, to be honest, if laser was more of a problem for us, but most games were not like too decided by them, so, or like the extra damage was enough to KO the Pokemon without having it stay in play, so yeah. Like I said, Sigilyph is rotating, we do lose our other Safeguarder as well, so bit of a shame. Beautyfly is the only like Safeguard style effect we have at the moment, but that is a stage 2 and is terrible, so yeah. The other Sigilyph also goes alongside the Trubbish here. These two kind of go hand in hand because they form the tool drop deck here with the toolbox ability. Being able to put 4 Pokemon tools on one card has only ever come back once more, and that was with Honchkrow V, and that never saw any play, unfortunately, because I guess it was just too little too late at that point. But, well, we don't have DCE in Gen 8, so that's probably why, actually. Yeah, Toolbox, obviously, being able to put 4 tools on one Pokemon means you're able to Tool Drop for a lot more damage here, and Tool Drop was really, really strong. Even when Startling Megaphone came out, Tool Drop was still, like, something you could play. You just had to be aware of it, right? But as Megaphone started getting less and less play, this ended up becoming stronger and stronger, so yeah, good card. Zora is also being mentioned alongside Zoroark here because Ascension is a really strong attack to have around, and we do have a good Zoroark coming out in a couple of sets, which would greatly benefit from having Ascension in play. So, yeah, unfortunately not keeping this. But we're also not keeping the Zoroark, which is crying shame for me because I love this card. Never the best one, although we did find a tournament winning list in X and Y that we played instead, so that was pretty fun. But Brutal Bash is just a great attack, right? 20 for every Dark Pokemon you have in play. We could actually technically play that now with Skyfield here as well. It's just not quite good enough at this point, I don't think. But Yveltal Zoroark could be a thing. The card is still pretty strong, and Skyfield takes it to 160, so sure, if you really want. But I think the Raichu is just better in the end because it's got a better typing for the current format, so yeah. Gothitelle is historical in terms of like its relevance here, because obviously Trevenant outclasses this thing, because Trevenant is just dumb. Why would you print this effect on the stage 1? But being able to block items whilst active on your ability definitely was very powerful throughout Gen 5, and yeah, the Gothitelle God of War deck was like attacking with this, but then it's most known for Gothitelle Excelgor that did very well at US Nats, so yeah, strong card, just took a lot of setup to do. Emolga has no retreat and Cold Family, and that's pretty much all you need to know about it. It was played for quite a long time before the rule change happened, and then you can't attack going first, so the card basically dropped off a cliff at that point. But it's strong, right? Being able to have a zero retreat pivot on a basic is why Hawlucha is so good, and having a setup attack like this can help out. Just not when you can't attack going first. If you could do this for zero energy though, then you would have Alolan Vulpix, and it's actually really strong. So don't count this kind of attack out. It's just got to be very, very worth it, which this is unfortunately no longer, you know, worth enough. Klinklang gets rotated. I might try and build this as one last thing, to be honest, because it did see lower age division success at Worlds. Plasma Steel being able to prevent any damage your metal Pokemon take from EXs is great. You know, there's not much else to say with it, but like, we have Bronzong available too, so you can play that sort of thing down, and just being able to nullify so many of the opponent's attacks is awesome. It does have a really horrendous Night March matchup though, which we're not going to see in the weekend, so I suppose maybe we can play it, but I don't know. Stunfisk I'm going to note because I liked it a fair bit. It was basically just a one prize Landorus. It did less damage, but you know, so does Manectric, and that's great. But you know, yeah, it was a one prize fighting type that you could use. Rumble was also pretty solid as well. I did manage to use that to good success. So yeah, if you wanted a Landorus that didn't take up 2 prizes, this was your little weird flatfish thing, you know. Bouffalant is awesome because its artwork is great, but it was the main user of the revenge attack that we see even now with Druddigon. We don't tend to see this attack happen, like, you know, it doesn't come up very often anymore, but it was a really cool part of Gen 5. And it was mostly this with the Terrakion that we'll see in a few minutes, a couple of minutes even, that just made this sort of attack so good. Hydreigon also goes, which is a right shame for the Phantom Forces one. I don't think that was ever going to see play with us at this point anyway. Pepper tried to make it work and just couldn't. I never really gave it a shot, to be honest, because I had too many other things in Phantom Forces to play. But being able to move Dark Energy around the board wherever you need it to be is really solid. So just a shame that we lose this kind of thing, to be honest. Then we get to Cobalion, who I'm not showing the full art because it was from Legendary Treasures, it's the print that's rotating. Iron Breaker preventing the opponent from attacking was irritating, to say the least, and some Bronzong decks did play this, but most of them went over to Heatran from Phantom Forces, as they should have in my opinion, because the Heatran does way more damage, and that ends up being more relevant for the deck, but it's still pretty irritating and you still have to get around it, so good enough card, to be honest. The EX Cobalion goes away as well, which is a solid thing for the metal deck, like, because Bronzong is still around, these sorts of things could have still been good. Righteous Edge is just nice for getting around things like the, well, it's actually kind of okay even into Night March too, because you KO, well, you don't KO the anything in one hit, but you do strip them of their DCEs, so that's a nice effect to have around. And being able to rip Seismitoad's energy off of it as well is another fantastic perk for this card. So yeah, it probably aged better than most of its kin, so that's interesting at least. Terrakion is like the cornerstone of Gen 5. This thing was ridiculous for almost the entirety of Generation 5's lifespan. Retaliate was just an instant KO on Darkrai, and that's all you ever needed to know. Yeah, because Darkrai was so powerful and so ubiquitous for so long, getting something KO'd in the previous turn and being able to just burst this thing into play and do a one-shot on that. Very efficient. And Land Crush ended up being pretty good when you got into it as well. Donphan made it work, and this makes it work too. Good card. Virizion is mostly an historical thing. It was fantastic when Noble Victories first dropped, and it kind of dropped off a cliff not too long after that, but Double Draw is really good in Gen 5 when you get attack going first, and occasionally Leaf Wallet was really strong as well, so yeah. The Virizion EX is a lot more noteworthy, and even now this would probably still see some play, although it was mostly anti-laser, as you saw in Andrew Mahone's Night March list, so yeah, I don't know if it would, but Fairy Box still plays this sort of thing quite a bit, so I think it could have. But I don't think special conditions are going to be strong enough moving forward without Hypnotoxic Laser to justify using this anymore. Tornadus EX is mostly just my own personal thing. This wasn't like the most noteworthy card ever, but it had Shuffle Draw 6 on it for 1 energy. In Gen 5, that's really powerful. But Jet Blast was just a bit too expensive in the end. Yeah, if you put all the plasma energy on it, it gets to 180, but then you lose this guy to the lightning weakness and you already just lost all of your good energy. So, yeah, I don't know. Thunderous EX was the biggest part of the plasma deck, that and Kyurem. It was a TDK for a reason after all. This being able to accelerate any energy from your discard pile to bench team plasma Pokemon was absolutely absurd because it let you play all sorts of special energy to do all kinds of different attacks in that deck, and yeah, just really, really powerful. Reshiram and Zekrom and Kyurem, actually later on here, all have the Outrage attack, which meant that not one-shotting them was a big problem for you because DCE, you could suddenly be taking hundreds of damage off of that. And they all had a pretty solid second attack too. Like with Emboar, Blue Flare was pretty solid. With Zekrom, with Electric, it was pretty good at the time. And Kyurem with Blastoise or Electrode Prime, when that was a thing, was also pretty solid. So yeah, Kyurem was probably the weakest one for its second attack, but sometimes you just needed that type coverage. So yeah. Zekrom EX was also noteworthy for the Electric decks and might have still been playable when Magnezone came out, or comes out I should say. Not necessarily the best one out there, but 150 is reasonable with 170 with the Muscle Band, and being able to just keep accelerating to it would have been alright. Maybe not stellar, but good enough. Landorus is a more historical one here because, Shadow Power just outclasses this one at this point, but Landorus Virizion was a deck that I played in Noble Victories and was really good, so I am noting it because of that. Abundant Harvest was just something that fighting types couldn't really do for the longest time, actually accelerate energy, so yeah. Landorus EX is a lot more noteworthy though. This card was dominant for a very long time, mostly because it did so well into Electric and Darkrai. Like, fighting was just a great type to be in Gen 5. And this was the most aggressive fighting type that you had in the format. It would be fantastic even now as an alternative weakness hitter for Lucario EX, and that deck is very strong still as well. Like, the fighting deck obviously got a ton of buffs in Gen 6, so yeah, hitting 90-30 for 1 energy. Night Spear for 1 is pretty balanced, right? As if. Kyurem was good outside of Plasma as well, but it was mostly in the Plasma deck that this ended up being so strong. It did have the Landorus attack, but just with a little bit more expense attached to it, but Chorus Machine could go around that, so that was fine. And Blizzard Burn was just a really strong amount of damage to do, especially when you could just retreat with the Keldeo over here, but we'll get to that in just a sec. Black Kyurem was the main attacker in Blastoise decks once Plasma Freeze came out and Superior Energy Retrieval was a thing for it. Being able to do 200 damage used to be able to one-shot everything in the format. Now even a Muscle-Banded Ballista can't necessarily kill everything, so, Power creep sure is a thing, huh? But yeah, being able to do this with Blastoise was super good, and it was top tier for quite a long time. The Baby Keldeo I'm noting because I personally played this in the Blastoise Kyurem deck as a single prize answer to stuff because sometimes you really did need to not play a 2-prizer down in that matchup. The attack itself was not amazing, but it was good enough to get 2 shots and like 1-shot Jirachis and stuff like that. So yeah, being able to do that on a single prizer, good enough for me. Keldeo EX is obviously insane for like the same reasons Darkrai is here. It's got everything basically going for it. It was an uncommon weakness at the time. Rush-In was very, very powerful for so many decks, especially when Floatstone came out. And Secret Sword could damage mod itself up to being 1-shot numbers if you needed it to be. So yeah, obviously mainstays in Blastoise too. Meloetta is an interesting one to have here because Psychic was uniquely good into particular matchups. It was obviously Psychic weak stuff is what you need to hit with this, but there were times where doing like 50 with weakness into say Sigilith was something that a deck would need because Safeguard was otherwise going to ruin you. So yeah, uniquely strong card in particular counterpoint matches, which is why we didn't see it very often, but still. Meloetta EX, I shouldn't really note this one because it's not that good, but it did have rounds, so that made the Seismitoad thing work. And actually I'm noting this one because it annoys me that we do not get to keep Seismitoad as a deck, because there is a time poll this is how much is annoying me, is I move the card. There's a time poll that comes out in 2 sets time, I'm pretty sure, or it might even be next set, which the time poll has got round, but we lose the entire round deck. We don't have Palpitoad, Seismitoad, Exploud even, and we don't have this Meloetta anymore. So why on earth did they I mean, it's for Expanded, right? But it's like, why on earth did they do that? It's not as if Rounder was gonna tear up Expanded anyway, so I don't know. It's stupid and I dislike it. And then finally for the Pokemon, after so long here, Genesect was an all-star for a bunch of different decks. It was useful obviously in its own thing with Virizion, that was where it did the most, but it was also good for Plasma decks because just being able to attach and Gust was really powerful. It was good in certain Fairy Box decks for the same reason, and yeah, it's just like, it's efficient, right? And it's got the tool to let it do 200 as well, so super strong card. But it's going away. Finally, we've got just over 30 items, like trainer cards to go over here, so let's go for it. Bicycle is an interesting card to like keep around, but yeah, we've got other things that do similar effects at this point to Turbo 3. Draw Until 4 is a nice effect though, and you would be able to go even further beyond with this, so probably for the best it rotates. Chorus Machine is part of all the Plasma stuff, so searching your deck for a Plasma Energy and attaching it to one of your Plasma Pokemon, could even be the active, is pretty good. Plasma Energy was only colorless, but most Plasma Pokemon had colorless in their cost, so it was fine. All of the A-Specs go, and basically almost all of them are noteworthy, so we'll go over them as we do. Computer Search was by far the one you saw the most, and realistically we just stuck with this most of the time because it was in the list anyway. Discard 2, search your deck for any one card. Most noteworthy for making base set Computer Search unplayable nowadays in Unlimited because it doesn't have the A-Spec rule, but still. Dazzle Machine, equally good in the right sort of deck, and honestly most decks were the right sort of deck, it just depended if you wanted to have the search from deck or from discard really. Discard 2 cards to the hand and put any trainer card from the discard pile into the hand. Very strong effect, and maybe more decks should have played it to be honest, but it is so hard to give up a search anything, right? Speaking of, Energy Search historically was useful, so we'll note it. Professor's Letter obviously outclasses it, so we don't need this card at the moment. But the next time this particular card gets printed is in Generation 8, which is kind of absurd to think about, but yeah. Ether is going to get replaced by a much better card in Max Elixir in a few sets time, but it was very funny for the Quadsar deck. If you didn't see that one, it was Plasma Storm, I think, was when I built that deck. Very, very stupid deck, and it's well worth the watch because it actually popped off something fierce. Gold Potion heals 90 from your active, and that is an effect which is very, very hard to come by. I think 50 is usually the most that you see healing from like an item without any downside to it. So yeah, super strong card, and it did also see play in a Quadsar deck, so yeah. Thank God we are getting rid of Hypnotoxic Laser, because I hate this card so much. Like, it's kind of neat with Virbank when you use it as like a triple plus power and the coin toss doesn't matter, but the fact of its sleep on a coin flip as well, and it's like 25% of the time the opponent just doesn't get to make their next move and it usually loses them the game. I hate this card. It is so bad for the format, and I'm glad we're getting rid of it. Master Ball is a weird one to include on here because like it saw no play with any of our stuff, but there was Landy Bats actually played this card on occasion because it was a costless way of searching for more bat pieces. Search your deck for any Pokemon, put it into hand, it's always a coin flip heads on Pokeball. So yeah, good card, just, you know, Ultra Ball kind of does the same thing as a discard too, so it's hard to justify this over Comp Search, right? Needs a particular deck, just like Scoop Up Cyclone does. I'm probably grateful that we don't have this card still, because AZ is perfectly fine for most of the situations you'd want this kind of thing for, and yeah, putting this effect on the item, we saw how bad that goes in Gen 8 with Scoop Up Net. It's not necessary, so yeah, kind of glad to see it go. Scramble Switch is probably one of my favorite trainer cards of all time, so a little bit sad to see this go. I know I didn't play it very often, but that's because most decks don't really have the scope to play it. Like, why would you, again, playing this over Super Scoop Up is difficult. But it switches your active and moves any energy you want from that to the new Pokemon you bring in. That's just cool, man. There's so much you can do with that. Moving on, we do lose Superior Energy Retrieval too, which I don't think gets reprinted until Gen 9. Like, literally the latest set has this in at the time of recording, Paldea Evolved. So, maybe it comes out in a different one before then? I don't remember it being available though. But yeah, discard 2, put 4 basic energy back into the hand. If you have hand-based acceleration, this card is absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, Magnezone would appreciate it. Luckily, this card is going to get superseded by Fisherman in the next rotation, so it's not, the effect is not going away entirely. We are going to get another version of it, but it does take up the supporter at that point, so yeah, take that as you will. Team Plasma Ball, another really good card for the Plasma Engine. Not so good for the Plasma Evolutions because it can't get basic Pokemon that evolve into Team Plasma guys, but still pretty solid nonetheless, so yeah, another good part of that deck. Colress is a huge one to get rid of, actually. One of the main things we are getting rid of is quite a lot of our draw support stuff here, because we're moving into the supporters now, and yeah, it's like we have N going away that we mentioned before. This one, like, it's not permanent, but N goes away for like 2/3 of the next format, and well, half the next format at the very least, and we're also losing Ghetsis, I guess, is a potential draw thing. But realistically, our draw options were Juniper, Colress, and N, and we're losing 2 of those. So we're going to have to use lesser draw cards for a fair bit here. Really relying on that Shaman to do the work, huh? Kind of funny how that works, huh? Let's make the secret rare the thing that we want to. I don't know, whatever. I have Konami brain when it comes to stuff that way because the cynical marketing shenanigans they do. But with Skyfield in play, to get back to the card here, Colress could potentially draw 16 cards if both players fill their bench, which is absolutely absurd. But it's easier than ever to get a really good draw off of Colress now, and with Battle Compressor you don't even have to play that many of them to VS Secret back, so yeah. Elisa is a very interesting card that I think just no decks really wanted. Tool Drop wanted just more card draw at the time, but I think now with Shaman, like if Tool Drop still survived a rotation, theoretically, I think this sort of card would have been really good for them, in the same way that Winona is really good for Rayquaza decks, where just being able to search out like 3 extra things is great, and you could search for Head Ringers with this, so yeah, I think it would have been a really good card if it stayed around. Just never had its time beforehand. Ghetsis is one we have refused to play. It is not a common card in most decks of this time, but it was banned and expanded because of the the fact that you could play this turn 1 for quite a long time. I don't know if it's still banned though because of the supporter rule. But yeah, the opponent reveals a hand, shuffles all items found there into the deck, and then you draw equal to the number of items that you put back. There is a chance that I could maybe tech this into a deck for the finale bit here of this format, but I just have never liked the card. But with Battle Compressor VS Seeker, it's at least a bit more usable than it was before, so we'll see. Hugh, I think its most notable use was in the Wailord Stall deck that took second at US Nationals this year in history. Each player draws or discards until they have 5 in hand, so the main thing the opponent would do against a Wailord deck is just never play any cards, right? Because you don't play anything and then you shuffle back with N and just keep going infinite, because the Wailord deck never attacks. Hugh stops that from happening. Like, if they stockpile like a 20-30 card hand to shuffle back in, you play Hugh and they have to discard 20-25 cards. Absolutely dumb. So yeah, specifically for that deck, it's funny. Iris is a card that I played like once in the Delphox deck because Magnezone could double supporter. It's a very strong card, but often not like the easiest to use, because a lot of the turns where you want to use this because of how many prizes the opponent has taken, you want to end instead, because you want to disrupt them and try and stop them from having game. But if you can set this up on the right turn, doing anywhere from 20 to 40 more damage is really strong. We do get a supporter card in a couple of sets called Giovanni's Scheme that has a guaranteed 20 plus as one of its effects, and that's good enough. Like, that can see play, so we don't lose this effect entirely, but still. Shadow Triad was mostly in the Verzian Genset deck to get back G-Booster, which we'll talk about in the set, but that was a Plasma card as well. But it could also be used to get stuff like Plasma Energy back, so you could do red signals, and it could get Hypnotoxic Laser if you really wanted. It could even get Colress or Getzes if you wanted to, because they are Team Plasma cards. So yeah. On to the stadiums. Aspertia City Gym is a weird one because I don't think it ever actually saw play here, but colorless Pokemon gaining extra HP was definitely something you could do. Tornado stacks were okay with this actually. We just never played that in the end because it was kinda hard to fit in and maybe not as strong as the decks we did play. So yeah. Frozen City is intriguing for Plasma decks. It makes any energy attached from hand to a non-Plasma Pokemon cost 20 damage for doing so. So that's very, very good against Blastoise actually. So yeah, if that was the meta ruiner in your area, play Frozen City. Fairbanks City Gym goes, which is probably for the best because, man, this was a ton of extra damage here. So we don't have the poison shenanigans we used to now, but putting 3 damage counters on a Pokemon thanks to Hypnotoxic Laser and this, just gross. And then with the tool cards to wrap things up here, Eviolite is historical. Obviously hard Charm outclasses this now because it does the same thing but for any Pokemon, but Eviolite was a huge deal when it came out, and this absolutely deserves mention here. Being able to turn what were 90 damage 2 shots into 70 damage 3 shots was huge for the old formats. G-Booster, like we've been mentioning quite a bit for the Genesect deck, was the way that they did one-shot stuff. 200 damage for free energy, discard 2 is a ridiculous effect, and it was recoverable with Shadow Triad, so if it got KO'd, then you could still get the card back. And yeah, alongside Deoxys, you could start getting Mega Pokemon with this too. Very good. Life Dew was noteworthy. We didn't end up playing Sableye Garbodor because that kind of got developed after Sableye rotated, but Life Dew was still noteworthy in a few decks. Pepper did try it in the Night March, though we didn't get to see that. I played it in the Swampert Milotic thing, just for recent things. Being able to give the opponent fewer prizes for taking a KO on your guy is obviously just a very strong effect. But again, it's a bit more disruptible, like Tool Card Apex are just generally harder to play, and it did rely on the opponent actually doing the thing, and that's not as strong sometimes, so yeah. Likewise, this is why Rock Guard didn't really see much play. There were a couple of Seismitoad decks I saw playing this actually, because this is Super Rocky Helmet, which is also getting rotated. If the opponent damages the active that this is attached to, Rock Guard does 6 damage counters, Rocky Helmet does 2. Rock Guard being the A spec obviously makes it a lot strong, gives it a lot stronger of an effect, but both of them could get Megaphone, which is kind of annoying. We do get a tool that sort of replaces this in Breakpoint though, called Bursting Balloon, which does this effect, but it discards itself at the end of the opponent's turn after you play it. Did see a ton of play as well though, for various reasons. There were quite a few points as to why that saw play, but yeah, kind of a shame, I guess. This is the one that we never got to see. Silver Bangle goes, so non-EXs can't do quite as much bonus damage to EX Pokemon at this point, but I think generally Muscle Band has always just been better than this anyway. Sometimes that 10 damage matters, but also sometimes 20 extra damage matters against a non-EX, so personally, I'm not too fussed about this going, because Muscle Band is just too good to not play. Silver Mirror was something that Team Plasma decks always had to worry about after the Plasma Blast set came out, because it just stopped any damage done to, non-EX Pokemon from the opponent's Team Plasma stuff. So like Sableye could stall infinitely with this, which was really annoying. The catch is that like Genesect for the Plasma stuff that way didn't care, so yeah. Team Plasma Badge was very occasionally used in some tool drop decks because it turned your Trubbish into a Plasma Pokemon so that you could Chorus Machine to it. That was how you got the energy acceleration going a bit better, so yeah. And then finally we have Victory Piece, which the Victini EX did not have to pay for its attack, which was awesome because it meant that you could attach to something else, so you just got free energy in play turn 1, or if you were up against specifically Virizion Genesect, you blew them up for no energy whatsoever because you Intensify and Burn for 100. And Intensify and Burn for 100, even on non-Virizion Genesect decks, was still pretty solid. So yeah, card was real good. Oh boy, this was easily the longest video that we have had in this sort of series so far, and it makes sense. You just see how many of the Pokemon are here, right? Gen 5 had an awful lot of good cards to talk about, and most of them were still left in the second half. But finally, hopefully this has been interesting. That's all I can really say for it. There's just so much here that, like, there's a few things we could even talk about probably that I didn't. But you've got to cut the video off somewhere, so that's what we will do. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you have found this interesting, and until next time, take care everyone.